Russia's foreign ministry has rejected President Trump's, I should say President-elect Trump, but President Trump's call for a ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war following Russia's Christmas Day attacks on Ukraine. But he said that Russia may be open to talks. For the latest on all this, I want to bring in Richard Haass, Counsel on Foreign Relations, President Emeritus. He is now Senior Counselor with Centerview Partners. Good morning to you, Richard.
Morning, Andrew.
Here we are. What are we? About 25 days before President-elect becomes the president. He said he was going to solve this, I think, in the first 24 hours of his presidency. Is that possible?
It's had ambitious, but it's not inconceivable that within his first year as president, the focus will shift from the battlefield to the negotiating table. I don't take Russia's announcement that it rejects the ceasefire as their final word. What Mr. Trump has to do is persuade Mr. Putin that time is not on his side, that the United States and the West have staying power. I think also it would be good if he allowed Ukraine to inflict some more pain on Russia. And I think it's quite possible that Russia could be brought around, however reluctantly, to negotiate seriously about a ceasefire in place.
What would have to happen, though, to be brought around, if you will?
I think the most important thing would be the United States and Ukraine would reach a deal. We would agree to an open-ended arms support in exchange for their willingness to accept a ceasefire on reasonable terms. I think Mr. Zelensky is now prepared to do something along those lines, and that would send a message to Russia that time is not on their side, that we're there so long as Ukraine has established war aims that are reasonable at this phase. And I think if that happens, and given the state of the Russian economy, which is clearly deteriorating, I think then there's a decent chance we could persuade a reluctant Mr. Putin, again, to accept a ceasefire in place. Doesn't mean Russia would have to give up its long-term ambitions. Doesn't mean Ukraine would. That's the genius, if you will, of an interim ceasefire. No one has to give up their long-term claims. It's not peace, but it is preferable to war.
Right. It also would mean Russia would maintain de facto control over a percentage of the territory it occupies right now. Richard, is there a line in the sand? Do you think that there is, a percentage that would be acceptable to both sides that can be agreed upon? That seems to be a decisive factor in this whole agreement.
Look, if you look at the last 3 years of this phase of the war, the amount of territorial control has not changed that much. After 2014, Russia controlled approximately 20% of Ukraine's territory. They still control around 21% of Ukraine's territory. So again, I think something like a ceasefire in place, it would be more than Ukraine would want to give up. It would be more than or less than Russia wants to grab. But again, it's interim, so I think both sides could probably live with it.
Richard, can we change topics to another country, which is China, this morning? And we'll make it a business topic, and we'll throw TikTok into the mix. The president has talked about TikTok quite openly about, I think his intent, I think he'd like to keep it running if possible, but January 19th, the day before the inauguration, effectively, is the day that this thing is supposed to not stop working, but you're not going to be able to download it or get updates for it on, Apple and Google. What do you think happens here?
I've been giving it a lot of thought. Donald Trump, as you know, has a certain penchant for doing the dramatic. And also he has intervened on behalf of TikTok being able to continue to operate in the United States before. So despite all the rulings up to now, I don't dismiss the possibility that he will try to find a formula where TikTok to continue. He has his friend who's involved. There's a lot of popular support for it. My own enthusiasm for TikTok, shall we say, is limited, given that too many young people use it as a source of news when it's anything but. But my guess is, and again, I don't have evidence for this, it's just my reading of Donald Trump and his past behavior, he will try to find a way to intervene. It's also a way for him to try to put some money in the bank, so to speak, with the leadership of China. That basically, okay, I've done you one thing, now what can you do for me? And that's very much consistent with the transactional approach Donald Trump tends to bring to the presidency.
How do you forecast what the relationship between the U.S. and China will be? Because right now, people are jumping to the worst-case scenario. But Xi Jinping apparently has been invited to the inauguration. Do you think he shows up, and what sort of signal would that send?
Look, this is a relationship that's been deteriorating for a number of years under both Republicans and Democrats. Indeed, Donald Trump, I think, deserves some credit for his first term as president because he introduced a degree of sobriety and realism into U.S. Chinese relations, essentially saying the whole policy of assuming that if China were integrated into the world economy, it would moderate its behavior at home and abroad. He called them on it. It hasn't worked. He introduced the tariffs. Joe Biden and company kept those tariffs, have since introduced new ones. So this is a difficult relationship. I think over the next 4 years, I'm actually skeptical. I don't think so much what Donald Trump and Xi Jinping can achieve. The real question is what they can avoid. Can we avoid a crisis in the South China Sea? Can we avoid a crisis over Taiwan? Can we avoid an unlimited tariff war? And I think the jury is out on all those things. And I think there's also a debate within Trump world between those people who largely view U.S.-Chinese competition through an economic prism and those who view it more geopolitically. And whichever group proves to be in the ascendance, that could have a real impact on the kind of deals Donald Trump would be prepared to strike with Xi Jinping.